The night sky descended, enveloping the narrow road leading from the city back to the countryside. The surroundings seemed to fade into complete darkness, with no bright lights, only distant stars flickering far above. In the eerie silence, the only sound was the rumble of the bus as it made its way along the desolate road, carrying passengers who were weary from a long day of work, eager to return to their homes. Dewey, a young man who had just finished his work in the city, sat on the night bus, silently gazing out the window. He was exhausted after a week of hard work, but he felt a sense of relief because he was finally heading home, where his loved ones were waiting for him. This bus was not crowded. Only a few people sat scattered throughout the seats. Dewey sat in the middle section, right next to the window. He wasn't one to talk much to strangers and preferred the quiet atmosphere of trips like this. However, this time, he felt something was different. A sense of unease lingered over him, as if someone was watching him. He shook his head, chastising himself for thinking such strange thoughts, since this was not his first time taking this bus. The driver was a middle-aged man with a solemn face and calm eyes. His hair was graying, his hands were rough, and the lines on his forehead suggested that he had been through many things in his life. He didn't speak much, focusing on driving, but occasionally his eyes would glance at the passengers, as if he were hiding a secret no one knew. An hour passed, and Dewey began to feel the weight of fatigue take over, his eyelids growing heavy. But then, an unexpected change snapped him awake. He felt a strange sensation, a chill running down his spine. Dewey turned his head and noticed a woman sitting behind him. She was wearing a white dress, her long black hair cascading down her shoulders, her face delicate, and her large eyes shimmering. However, what struck Dewey as strange was that she was sitting alone, and there were no other passengers nearby. He stared for a moment, feeling confused. Who was this woman? Why couldn't he remember seeing her board the bus? He looked around but didn't see anyone else. There were no other passengers near him. Dewey looked back at the woman, but she didn't seem to notice him. In fact, she had her head lowered, as if lost in her own thoughts. However, what was even stranger was that, despite being seated right behind him, Dewey couldn't recall when she had gotten on the bus. A sense of unease began to rise within him. He tried to shake off these thoughts and returned to staring out the window. However, the surroundings grew even more unsettling. The houses along the road had long disappeared, replaced by dark trees and silent fields. The road seemed to stretch on endlessly, with no signs of any villages or towns. The only thing visible was the dim glow of the bus lights cutting through the dark. Suddenly, the woman spoke, breaking the oppressive silence in the bus.
Are you tired, Dewey?
Dewey was startled, turning back to look at her. A strange sensation surged through him. He had never introduced himself to her, so how did she know his name? He opened his mouth to ask, but before he could, the woman smiled gently, as if she already knew what he was thinking.
Who are you? I don't remember seeing you before.
I've been on the bus since earlier. You just didn't notice. I felt you were very tired, so I wanted to talk to you a little to pass the time.
Dewey looked around again. There was no one else except him and Lon. The other passengers were gone. He turned to look at the driver, but the man was silently driving, showing no signs of anything unusual.
I guess I'm just too tired. My eyes are playing tricks on me.
He turned back to Lon, but by now, she had stood up and walked over to him. She sat down beside him. Her closeness made him feel somewhat uncomfortable.
Don't worry. You just haven't realized that you're on a very special bus. This bus isn't taking you home. It's taking you to a place from which you will never return.
Dewey stared at her, confused. He had no idea what she was talking about. He looked out the window again and noticed something unsettling. The bus was now driving down a road he didn't recognize, a road that was only lit by dim, eerie lights and surrounded by silent fields. There were no signs of any villages or towns.
What? Where are we going?
We're getting close to our final destination. You'll understand everything when we get there. But don't worry, you won't be alone.
At that moment, Dewey felt a sudden chill fill the air, not from outside, but deep within himself. The entire atmosphere in the bus seemed to shift. The darkness outside grew deeper, the bus lights dimmed further, and only the oppressive silence remained, enveloping everything. Dewey didn't know how he had been entranced by the woman, but he could feel the atmosphere changing. The bus seemed stranger than ever. The space inside became eerily silent, with only the rhythmic sound of the wheels turning on the road. The shadows outside the window blurred, as if they were surrounding the bus, not allowing it to escape from this road. Dewey looked at Lon, but her gaze was no longer gentle like it had been earlier. Her eyes now seemed like deep black holes, sparkling with strange gleams. She smiled, but her smile brought no comfort. Dewey felt like something was wrong, but he couldn't stop himself. He wanted to ask her what was going on, but the words stuck in his throat.
You know, this is a bus only for lost souls. People like you seem to have gone too far, stepping into a world that there's no turning back from.
Dewey tried to swallow down the rising fear in his chest. He couldn't believe the words she was saying, but her eyes and the heavy silence in the bus made it impossible for him to deny the strange feeling.
What are you saying? I don't understand.
You'll understand when we arrive. Everything will be clear, and you won't have to worry about anything anymore.
Her words pierced Dewey's heart like an arrow. He couldn't speak. He could only sit there, staring out the window, where the dim lights of the bus were fading into the distance. The road ahead seemed endless. Everything before him became blurry, unclear, as if reality was disappearing. Dewey turned back to look at her, but this time, Lon was no longer seated where she had been. She stood up and walked toward the front of the bus. Each step she took seemed to echo through the silent space, as if she were stirring up some otherworldly realm that Dewey couldn't understand. She approached the driver, a man who still showed no sign of change, continuing to drive, his eyes hollow and unfeeling, as if he no longer cared about anything. Suddenly, Dewey felt a shift in the air. This bus was no longer a regular bus. He felt an ice-cold chill run down his spine, and the shadows from outside seemed to creep into the bus. He looked again, and this time, he clearly saw that the seat behind him was completely empty. No one was there, not Lon, not any other passengers. He was alone in this dark, empty bus. Without warning, the bus stopped. Dewey jumped, not realizing they had reached their destination. He looked around and saw a bizarre sight. In front of him was a large wrought iron gate, shrouded in thick mist. The ground surrounding the gate was an old cemetery, with cracked and moss-covered tombstones. There was no sound, only the wind whispering through the gnarled trees, creating strange noises, like the sighs of sorrowful spirits.
Where are we?
This is where lost souls find their way. This bus isn't meant to take you home, but to the place you belong. You no longer belong to the world outside.
Dewey felt his heart stop. Everything became too much to comprehend. He tried to stand up, but his legs felt weak, as if they couldn't carry him. He turned to look at the driver, but the man remained motionless, sitting with empty eyes, like a shell of a person.
No, this can't be real. I need to go home. I have family. I have people waiting for me.
This bus cannot turn back. Once you board this bus, you can never go back. It is fate.
Dewey could no longer bear it. He ran toward the door, but as soon as he stepped outside, he felt himself being pulled into an endless black void. Everything around him became unclear, indistinguishable. He couldn't tell what was real and what was an illusion. In that moment, Dewey realized he had fallen into a loop he couldn't escape. Suddenly, he heard a soft laugh coming from behind. Lon reappeared, but this time, her face was no longer smiling. Her eyes gleamed brightly, and Dewey realized he was facing a being that was not human. She was not alive. She was a lost soul, a ghost leading him to a place from which he could never return.
Do you understand now, Dewey? This bus has ended and you will never leave this place.
Dewey couldn't make sense of what was happening, but the strange and haunting feelings continued to pull him deeper into a world he never wanted to be part of. The bus was no longer just a mode of transportation. It had become a gateway, a door to a place he couldn't return from. Dewey could clearly feel the chill from Lon words, from the eerie gaze of the driver, from the unsettling silence that enveloped the bus. He no longer felt like a regular passenger. He had stepped into another space, a space where there was no turning back. Each breath Dewey took seemed to freeze, and his mind swirled. He could hear the wind howling through the window cracks, but it wasn't the wind from outside. It was an icy breeze from within this world. The fields and roads had completely vanished, replaced by ancient gravestones, tombs buried in the dark. There was no light, no life, only endless silence, as if everything around him had already died. Dewey turned back to look at Lon, but she was no longer the kind woman with a gentle smile she had been at first. Now she was a soul, a ghost with deep, shining eyes. She stood still, looking at him as if waiting for something. She didn't say a word, just stared at him, as though wanting him to feel the truth she was bringing.
Who are you? Why have you brought me here? I just want to go home.
You can't go home anymore. This bus is not a regular ride. This is the place for lost souls, those who cannot find their way back. You're too late, Dewey.
Dewey felt his heart stop. He wanted to resist, to run, but his legs had no strength. Everything before him began to turn into a nightmare. The dark tombstones, the blurry shadows, and the laughter echoing throughout the space. All of it seemed to close in on him. He felt like prey, about to be swallowed by the abyss. He remembered when he first boarded this bus. At that time, he thought it was just another ordinary night ride, like any other bus ride. But now, he realized he had been tricked, pulled into a cruel game that he couldn't escape from. The bus was not taking him home as he had hoped. It was taking him to a place where he would never return.
No, I don't want to be here. I have to go home. I have family. I have loved ones. Rasamdan.
You no longer belong to the world outside. Everything has ended. You are part of this place, Dewey. You are just another lost soul like us. We cannot turn back.
At that moment, Dewey felt as though he was being pulled into an invisible whirlpool. He could feel the coldness engulfing him, slowly swallowing everything he had ever known. Each passing second felt like an eternity. He could no longer see familiar images, no longer sense space or time. All that was left was an empty feeling and deep fear. He looked around, no longer seeing Lon. No more bus, no more driver. Everything around him was now just graves, wandering souls, and a thick fog that covered it all. He couldn't tell what was real and what was an illusion. The wandering spirits around him moved silently, but their eyes held the deep sorrow and hopelessness of eternity. Dewey knew that he was in a place with no way out, and that it had been decided long ago. Dewey wanted to scream, wanted to run from this place, but he couldn't do anything. The feeling of being trapped took over his entire body. He was like a lost soul, wandering in a world he could never return to. The ghosts around him were quiet, but their gaze was full of compassion. Dewey didn't know what they were feeling, but he could sense their comforting presence.
You will never be alone, Dewey. We are all souls in the same plight. We will always be here, forever. You will become part of us, and together we will wait for other lost souls.
Dewey no longer had the strength to speak. He could only stand there quietly, feeling the cold seep into his heart. In that moment, he realized that he had lost everything, not just his home, his family, but his very life. He had fallen into a loop with no escape. All hope had vanished. He was no longer human. He was just a wandering spirit, a part of a world that had already died. And then, Lon words echoed one last time like a farewell full of haunting meaning.
Welcome to our world, Dewey. You will never be afraid again. You are one of us now.
Everything slowly faded to darkness, and Dewey realized that he no longer existed in the real world. He had been consumed by a place of eternity, a place where lost souls would never return. And the night bus, with all its strange happenings, had finally come to an end.